Hello everyone, my name is Retro Mary, your off-the-shelf VTuber, and today on this wonderful YouTube video, you're going to be playing, not really playing, more reading and acting to the Xenoblade Chronicles 3 interview that came out very recently on Nintendo's website. They asked the three developers of the game, I feel so fucking bad about this. Tetsuya, Kojima, and Yokota, all very prevalent in the making of Xenoblade Chronicles 3, about their time on Xenoblade 3, and several other questions that'll be covered in the interview itself. I hope everyone is having a good day, and I hope everything's doing well. I can't wait to see what this thing has to say, because it probably has a lot of information about it that we don't know about the behind-the-scenes stuff on Xenoblade 3. So in which case, let's just get started. So, as we take a bigger look on our screen here, we can scroll down. We're gonna go through parts 2 and part 3 as well, but this is basically an introduction to Action Developer. So, the first part here, the relationship between Xeno, foreign things. First off, can we just take a quick round of introductions? Then we have Tetsuya, Ko, and Yoda introducing themselves, one being producer, one being a director, and one being senior director and a chief creative officer at Monolithsoft. All very intertwined with Xenoblade. In Tetsuya's case, being up to Xenoblade Saga, which is really far back, about 2002 to 2006. So 20 years in, this man's still kicking around at Monolith. Here comes the real stuff. Thank you. We at Monolithsoft, the developers of Xenoblade Chronicles 3, joined remotely, and we hope to hear you both Nintendo and Monolithsoft's thoughts on this title, as well as the stage of development and trial and error experience between the scenes. Now then, Yokota-san, would you give us a brief introduction to the Xenoblade Chronicles series? Okay, this one's basically talking about how the Xenoblade Chronicles series works. Essentially, instead of it being turn-based battles in the JRPG setting, it's more MMO-esque as you seamlessly go from the field to battle with real-time combat. Thank you. So this is the third entry in the series, but where does it stand within the series? This title is the third entry. Takahashi states this title is the third entry in the series to Xenoblade Chronicles, following Xenoblade 2 and Xenoblade 1, and it's the combination of the trilogy. This first entry depicts how the main character and his companions living in the world of Bionis, the gods, utilize the future-seeing blade the Monado, protect the world they live in, and fight for the future. The second entry depicts a storyline of finite and eternal life in which the main character, who lives in the world of Titans, up in the skies, meets an immortal girl Blade, and they work together to reach paradise. This third entry is a story about 6 young soldiers belonging to 2 hostile nations, set in Ionius, where the worlds of the first and the second titles are linked together. So, the first big question that's coming in here, if the setting in this title is linked to the first and second entry, does that mean that the story continues through all 3 titles? Takahashi states, no, the stories of 1, 2, and 3 are all standalone. Although some elements and designs from 1 and 2 will appear in the third entry here and there, there's no need to play the first and second games to understand how the story or how to play. However, since it's a series of works, the underlying theme is consistent, and in each case, the story unfolds based on the relationship between foreign things. Also, I used the word culmination earlier, but this title brings together all the things that have developed over the past 15 years since 2007, when development of the first title in the Xenoblade Chronicles series began, as well as the gameplay systems that developed throughout the series. So you don't need to know everything about Xenoblade in order to get into this game, which I think is very good for first-timers just coming in trying to see what Xenoblade's about, seeing that this game's getting as big as it is. Because honestly, this game is bigger than any of the Xenoblade Chronicles so far. Still think 2 is going to be the best entry point, quote-unquote, but I feel like this is going to be another one that could be an entry point for someone if they don't know the series. So Yokota says, so by culmination, you don't mean to bring the series closer to series, but rather round out the trilogy thematically. Takahashi says, yes, that's right. I guess you could say this is like a summary for moving on to the next steps to the future, which is interesting. I like the fact that this is more based on theming than anything else, because thankfully it doesn't kick X off the table, because I was kind of afraid of that. I felt like they were just kicking X off of the board, but if they want to have this not be a closed off series, that it's closed out the series, that means that Xenoblade X has a chance of getting remade and getting a sequel, which is great because it was sequel baited to high heaven in the Wii U days. I see. Now I want to dig deeper into this title's story, the culmination of the series. How does the story for Xenoblade Chronicles 3 begin? Takahashi states the story's starting point is unreasonable power. The story itself begins on the battlefield. There are two hostile nations, and for the young people living there, the world is a place where fighting is a part of everyday life. Then young people from these two nations band together against this unreasonable power that forces them to fight on a daily basis. The story is about how they, with their inherently different ideals, cultures, and histories, will resist this great power. So the two fight this unreasonable power. Two forces will have to fight together as one. Takahashi says, yes, this is correct. In my stories, I always try to portray the enemies in such a way that even a powerful enemy has their principles, justice, and righteousness so that we can partially sympathize with them, which is important for a lot of enemies. There's some people that really like to ham it up, but it's important for a lot of enemies to have something that the people can empathize with, so you could be like, hey, they're not just a two-dimensional villain, they're actually a person. This is why I've always tried to cast the enemy in an ambiguous light, rather than make it clear whether they're good or bad. By doing so, players can understand and immerse themselves in the enemy's perspective, and I think that this is something which makes the story interesting. But this time, I want to depict it from a different angle. The reason that I think power actually takes many forms, and that is not about philosophy, justice, or righteousness, but more often is about something as simple as dignity or greed. That is fair. There's a lot of stuff in the Xenoblade series where the power of your character basically comes from the power of friendship and everything like that. There is a few people that do just to take power and put it in the form of something like greed. Most likely, Mumkar from Xenoblade 1 is the one that really comes to mind. Malos in Xenoblade 2 too, but they're more trying to find a purpose in life, which is more under philosophy. So I guess this one's gonna go more for a lot of the enemies are very greedy, and that's how they get their power, and that kind of power is gonna fight against the righteous justice kind of philosophy power that our main protagonists are going to have. Right? So our interviewer asks, I see. So this is a battle against the unreasonableness that can't be overcome by logic or rationality. Yokota-san, how did you feel when you first heard about the storyline? Yokota states, well, I wanted to know how the story would unfold as soon as possible, and I really wanted to move forward with development. Already at the proposal phase? Yes. Having the first and second entries as a background, the proposal had a main protagonist divided between two rival nations, initially fighting each other, but then uniting. I thought, the core theme is solid. Of course, there were challenges at the time. Kojima agrees. Yes, I agree. At first, I thought it didn't seem like Xenoblade Chronicles at all. I think Takahashi-san was deliberately trying to remove the Xenoblade-ness from the series. The story for the first and second games were completely different, but there was a sense of Xenoblade-ness that was common through both of them. I didn't feel that at all at the initial proposal phase, and the reason for that is because the game's world is very serious. That is the world that Takahashi-san wants to depict in his title, but I was concerned about whether it would be acceptable to deliver it to players of previous games in the series for what it is. The design this time would also be different from previous entries in the series, but after a lot of trial and error, we found a good balance, and in the end, I think we were able to create this sense of Xenoblade-ness, which is good. I like the games to feel like, I'd love the game to feel like Xenoblade, because again, you know, you want to keep this cohesive theme. You obviously also want to keep how the game feeling like Xenoblade. The interviewer then continues, Indeed, the introduction shows that people are born to fight, and with a lifespan of only 10 years, I got a sense of the theme's seriousness. What's the reason for setting this 10-year lifespan? Takahashi states, we humans have a lifespan of 70 to 80 years, and for some, 90 or more. But I have wondered how our perception of life would change if our lifetimes were shorter. So, if I simply set the lifespan to 10 years, I thought about which decade of life I should choose. Looking back at my own experience, I think that the formative years of my personality were between the ages of around 0 to 10. I also think the most influential period for something like my outlook on life was between the ages of 10 and 20, the years where people are most impressionable. It seems to me that, while they are both 10 years at length, it is a vulnerable period where I was exposed to many things, took on challenges, and created things as well. And my values and ways of thinking changed drastically. That is why I set the main character's period in the part of their life. I love this actual section of the part of the game. The fact that everyone's basically 10 to 20 years old and then they just die. Like, you can get honestly, you can get a lot done in 10 years. But, it feels like 10 years just the grand scheme of everything. So, I kind of feel how that kind of would affect someone if their entire lifespan was 10 years and just dictated by war. I feel like it would definitely suck. There's a definite reason on why someone would fight to change their world, especially in a bit of a time rush. Because I know at least one character has at least 3 months left to live before they die, so there's definitely a bit of a time crunch there, adding more to the seriousness of the game. I see, this interviewer says. So that's why the soldiers in the two nations are also young. Takahashi continues, I also wanted to convey to the young generation nowadays through my story that they can create their own path however they want. They should not give up to achieve their dreams and goals. Yokohata continues, we have a great deal of discussion in the beginning on why to have a 10-year lifespan. Although the seriousness was in full swing from the beginning, I remember hearing the thoughts of Takahashi-san just mentioned, and I was in complete agreement. Doing so would surely bring out this sense of Xenoblade-ness, the word again, that I thought that I wanted to say with the course of this storyline. Takahashi-san adds on here, the first title is kind of like a straight A student to me. The second one is not quite straight A student with much brighter and more lighthearted start. The third title, I wanted to stop being a goody two-shoe. It was a challenge when I was thinking about what kind of response would be getting people who played the first and second titles, but one of the themes is finding your new self and moving path towards the future. So I knew that I couldn't go back to the past to do the same thing again. I think this one's important. No, they don't seem to be talking about quality of the game here. For those people that would want to say, he don't think Xenoblade 2 is very good. No, this is about the seriousness of the game. Xenoblade X is a straightforward plot that has a pretty serious setting. The Xenoblade 2 isn't as dark at the start. It is much more bubbly and lighthearted at the forefront, and then gets a bit darker. Not super dark, but a bit darker. And I don't even know if it gets as bad as Xenoblade 1's themes, but it can get pretty dark here and there. But I think for Xenoblade 3, they definitely want to go all in with this. Kojima continues, by listening to Takahashi-san's thoughts in detail, I decided to do my best to express what he wanted to convey. The interviewer then asks, this game starts with a battle scene, but the main character, Noah, is an off-seer, isn't he? I felt that this is also an unusual premise for a battle-focused game. What's the role of an off-seer? Takahashi mentions, Noah, the first main character the players can control, takes on the role of an off-seer, who mourns the soldiers who have lost their lives on a battlefield. Through mourning, Noah thinks a lot about things. As a character, I envision him like a philosopher. Philosopher? Asked our intrepid interviewer. Takahashi then continues, if a person who has the beliefs, who has a somewhat philosophical view of the world or life encounters various changes and events throughout the story and faces the problems that cannot be solved by his own logic, what kind of answer will that person find? In this way, I wanted to portray the character as a philosopher or a poet. The interviewer then goes into one of the statements that Takahashi stated. You mentioned earlier the first of the main characters that players can control, but are there any other main characters? Takahashi clarifies, in this title, there are 3 characters from the nation of Keeves, introducing a first playable character, Noah, and there are 3 from the nation of Agnes, including the heroine Mio. The story unfolds with all 6 characters as the protagonists, with obviously Noah and Mio being mentioned first. They're going to be the main protagonists from each nation. Noah is an Offseer from the army of Keeves, and Mia is an Offseer from the army of Agnes. Although the 2 of them are central figures among the 6, all 6 are the game's main characters. The game progresses with the premise that each of the 6 characters have their own thoughts towards their 10-year lifespan, but for a single great purpose, they will cooperate and set out on an adventure together. Indeed, when I played the interview said, indeed, when I played the game, I got the impression that all 6 characters moving the story forward. Takahashi continues then, this time, I wanted to depict the feelings of the 6 main characters equally, so I tried to keep the word count and dialogue as even as possible. Of course, the central figures of Noah and Mio have a few more lines, but compared to the first and second titles, which focus on the hero and heroine, you'll notice that other characters are also strongly involved in the story. This may sound extreme, but I don't want the other characters just be nodding along towards the end of the game. That's actually fair, because I noticed that there's definitely some characters, namely people like Aegeon in Xenoblade Chronicles 2, where they don't have a very major role in their game. And they're technically a main character. Same with things like Tora in Xenoblade Chronicles 2. But at the end of the game, he doesn't really get to do much. It's mainly Pyra and Mithra who have the main thing against Malos. Tora's just kind of there, it feels like. And I'm glad that they're basically saying that that is going to change. The interviewer states, it certainly does feel awkward when the characters who have been in a journey together become less responsive midway through. Takahashi continues again. Having more than one main character is something I want to do for a long time. The main idea is similar to an ensemble drama, a method of creating films on TV series, and I wanted to try to somehow incorporate this idea into a game. Different lives, different positions, different points in view are interchanged to weave a single story. In fact, this is very incompatible with RPGs. In an RPG, the player projects themselves on the main character, but it becomes difficult to follow the story if the player switches the viewpoint as they progress throughout the game. Also, the game requires all 6 characters to be in the same place at the same time, which is also an incompatible point. I had to consider what kind of plot and setup would make the story flow smoothly, while shifting different points of view, as well as making it work in a game. Keeping these in mind, I implicitly incorporated into the traditional game creation process. It may be difficult for the players to notice, but personally, I feel as though the game confidence in this method of game creation. You definitely should. You've worked on plenty of good games. Yukata adds, also, in the previous series of the game, the story progresses with 6 main characters, but only 4 of them took parts in battles, so the number of playable characters displayed at any one time was limited. But this time, all 6 characters participated in battles. This is what we were particular about for this title. Since all 6 are the main characters this time, we decided it would be an all-out battle with all 6 characters being displayed at once. And that's why they have the 6 characters instead of the normal 3 or 4 characters in your game. Because they went over and they wanted all the characters to be important, so they figured they should all have statement in any given battle you have. They are all the main characters. The interviewer asks, is there any particular reason for having 6? Takahashi states, it didn't necessarily have to be 6. I'd have been fine with either just 4 or 8 playable characters. I settled on 6 main playable characters after considering the overall details, like the idea that 4 would be a little too little and 8 would be too many. So the limits of display, the limits of the volume, the content we can create, and ease of understanding while playing. In fact, the second entry also has 3 pairs of 2 playable characters and displays 6 characters, but this time, The 6 characters fight independently. There's also a 7th character called a hero who can join the fight, and multiple enemies are attacking as well. One of the challenges we wanted to take on this time was to see how many players could be displayed at the same time while also allowing the game to work properly. Speaking of pairs, one of the features of the new battle system is the characters in interlink. If you don't know what interlinking is, this would be the section of interlinking.
Won't change anything.
And they'd be able to form into these Ouroboros, who are basically 2 beings fused into one. While fighting Mr. Wild right over here.
What did I just...
The first ones that Noah and Mia transform into their Ouroboros forms.
Is it mine?
Well. Looks like they're aiming at you.
Inside.
Yeah. So that's really cool. Takahashi goes forward. The Ouroboros system was implemented as the title in a symbolic form of foreign things becoming one. The interviewer asks, so instead of the 2 people piloting a robot or a vehicle, they fuse to become a single entity. Which is actually a good point. This kind of reminds me of the scales from Xenoblade X, to be honest. Yokata mentioned, at the beginning of planning, there was an Ouroboros that looked like a robot, but it was not in the form of the character of the writer pilot. Kojima continues, I think that it was decided from the beginning that one consciousness would enter the consciousness of the other. I saw that Takahashi-san wanted to depict the kind of thing people can only understand about each other once they fully unite, an understanding that would otherwise need to be achieved via words or other means, and conversely, the kind of common problems that become visible. Takahashi reiterates, this idea for foreign things becoming one is something we have tried to express since the beginning of Xenogears back in the day. A person's life basically built out of relationships with other people, a relationship with foreign things. I'm always conscious of this perception when I'm making things. Yokota continues, Xeno in that title in the English preference means something foreign, right? Takahashi clarifies, yes it is. The relationship between Xeno, foreign things at the core relationship of the series that bears its name. Alright. That was really cool, and I'm super glad they mentioned that because there was always kind of like, no one really mentions the whole meaning of Xeno. And I guess the main thing for Xeno is the whole foreign things becoming one implementation that they had before. In Xenoblade 1, obviously, Shulk becoming a god seems to be the place where the foreign thing becomes one with someone in a relatable situation. In Xenoblade 2, that would obviously be Rex and Pyra / Mithra / New, growing the relationship, and by the end of the game, much closer than they ever been. And in Xenoblade X, even, I'm pretty sure that was something with Elma, where she was revealed to be an alien who was trying to save humanity and trying to merge, basically get aliens culminating with their alien technology and, live with it. Having this foreign technology and foreign planet and learning to coexist with it. And here, I think they want to keep that kind of thing going with the Xeno theme of Xenoblade. I was going to say Xenoburst. What the fuck? Now, on to part 2. Sound that has never been heard before. The interviewer goes to ask, we've asked you about the story and the background of this work, but now we'd like to hear the visual aspects you've worked on to express them. How were the characters designed? Takahashi states, as with Xenoblade 2, we asked Saito-san to design the characters. Saito-san is a freelancer character designer illustrator who designed the main character for Xenoblade 2 and Xenoblade 3. So, screw anyone for hating Xenoblade 2, because the same design is working here. However, since the story is more serious than the previous titles, we decided the characters to look more mature by making them taller. We also designed the costumes to not be as flashy or match the tone of the story. In the scenes where the main characters make their first appearance, they're wearing their military uniforms of their respective nations. Although they're dressed differently than in their key art, we asked Saito-san to tailor the overall design, including the clothing, to a dignified style that matches the seriousness of the story. And that's true, in their military forms, they look they're less colorful. They basically have a very similar designs as they had before, but they're much less colorful and, you know, popping out. They don't shout their personalities at you. They're just soldiers at the end of the day by this point. I think the same thing for, the same thing for everyone else too. Although it looks really good on Mia. Do you feel that you were able to decide on a visual design of the main characters quite smoothly? Kojima replies, no, it was a hellish process of trial and error. We especially struggled to decide on the concepts for Noah. During development, Saito-san came to Monolith's office and asked to work with us. His seat was in front of Takahashi-san's workplace. We used Takahashi-san's words to conjure up an image of the characters and convey the intended feeling of Saito-san, who drew various illustrations based on that. However, Takahashi-san looked at the illustration at the end of the day and said, no, that isn't it. He had to repeat this process again and again. That's fair. It is kind of fair to, like, you know, come up with it's hard to come up with, you know, someone's vision based on just their words. Takahashi continues, we particularly struggled with Noah's design. Saito-san came up with all kinds of illustrations, but none of them quite looked like Noah. I think I mentioned earlier that I wanted Noah, the main protagonist, to be positioned as a philosopher or a poet, but I didn't want him to seem like a weak-willed character. However, I also didn't want him to look too pompous. The drafts he drew seemed to be at the two extremes. Some made him look fierce, while others looked somewhat gentle. I was worried that his speech might sound pompous if the character design was too noble. We struggled to come up with a design that made us think, yes, this is Noah. On the other hand, Kojima said, on the other hand, we could agree that the other characters' designs relatively easily because their appearances, including their race and physiques, had already been defined in the character profiles. That's fair, because a lot of the other characters have different races that are somewhat established in the series already. Obviously, Tandion is human, like Eugene is High Entian, Theo is a Gormott, stuff like that. Once you decide on the character design, you have to turn them 3D for the game, right? The interviewer asks. Takahashi states, the development staff worked very hard on this part. I wanted to utilize Saito-san's illustrations as much as possible, without making the characters look too figurine-like or computer-generated. Our staff put a lot of effort into expressing details such as their skin, hair, clothing, and contours. Wasn't it a challenge to translate their illustrations to CG? Takahashi-san really wanted to keep Saito-san's touch in the game. Of course, he also had Saito-san draw the illustration using digital tools, Kojima said. But all hand illustrations have its unique touch. Even in contouring, there's not a single contour with a fixed thickness of line. Each contour is drawn using different kinds of weak and firm lines. However, if we simply translate the illustrations into a 3D model, the characters look flat, and we wouldn't do it justice to Saito-san's art skills. Takahashi-san's task for the team was to maintain the styles of the original drawing and turn them into CG. Again, we all stayed until nighttime to discuss. We were still discussing this, and that Takahashi-san, who was leaving the office, walked away and muttered, "Start over again." Ah, it hurts. This all happens, and Yukata asked, this all happened before you started working from home, right? That's fair. Oh, so this all happened before the whole COVID thing must have took place. Oh, and this game was in pipeline for a while. Shoot. Indeed, we might be able to do this kind of intense discussion about development if we were working at home, Kojima said. The interviewer asked again, are you satisfied with the final product, Takahashi-san? Takahashi thankfully states, yes. I think we reproduced the facial expression and the hair very accurately. In particular, I think you can tell that a lot of effort was went into creating the hair. We used special shaders the program that performs rendering processes such as shading and 3D computer graphics. It's used a wide variety of visual effects. And there were some scenes where characters would have looked more jagged and noisy if it were done normally. So both the characters and programmers had to make a lot of adjustments. I remember it was a very challenging process. And overall, the illustrations of the 3D models actually do look really similar. I like it. Good job on them. They did really well. God, I'm looking at these and I'm just like, gosh, this looks like a VTuber model when they're staring at me like that. The interviewer asked, I have asked you about the visual aspect of the game, but now I'd like to talk about the sound. Speaking of the sound, flutes appear in this title as an item symbolizing Mia and Noah's offseer role. Why did you choose flutes? Kakaki states, I thought that people would understand universally the use of musical instruments when expressing the role of an offseer. In other words, we knew what we wanted to express the role using music, but it took us time to decide which instrument to use. During a discussion with Mitsuda-san, who was a composer for Chrono Trigger, Xenogears, Xenoblade Chronicles 2, and other games, who composed the music for this title as well, he told us that there are roughly 3 families of musical instruments: percussion, string, and wind. Makes no sense. However, if the professor had a percussion instrument, I would have thought it a little difficult to express the somber and emotional scene of this title. Yes, I agree. String and wind are the only ones that would really work for someone that's mourning someone. I think that it's one of the best things that they could have used a wind instrument, but something like a harp would have also worked as well. But yes, I definitely see why percussion was 100% off the table immediately. The interviewer agreed, and then Yokata said, "It's interesting to imagine how it would have looked in a game like this, though." Takahashi continues, "While strings wouldn't have those kinds of problems, you'd need a stringed instrument of a reasonable size to make it sound like it would go nicely with an offseer. And Noah and his friends still need to fight. Only a portable instrument would meet the standards. They couldn't possibly fight with a double bass on their back. As it suddenly appeared, people would think, wait, where would that come from?" Takashi continues, "Then, when I was looking for a good wind instrument, Mitsuda-san suggested, how about a Sinbone flute? A traverse flute made of Shinotake bamboo with holes drilled into it. A Japanese musical instrument that has been across Japan since long ago. After listening to the sound of the instrument, I thought this would be a good choice. I also liked it because it would incorporate a very distinctive Japanese taste. Perfect for a JRPG." The interviewer states, "I see. So that's how you chose flute as the instrument and incorporated the flute into the main theme." Takahashi continues, "I think it must have been difficult for Mitsuda-san to use flutes as the main sound because they are used in touching scenes, sad scenes, tender scenes, and battle scenes. Using these flutes, he had to create melodies that would sound good in isolation, while keeping in mind that the flute sound would be used as a theme across the different scenes." Which is true, flutes are hard to write for. The interviewer states, "By the way, were those pieces really recorded using flutes?" Takahashi answers, "Yes. The music track A Life Sent On, released on the official Twitter account, starts with a flute melody, excuse me, and this was the first track Mitsuda-san wrote. From the beginning, I wanted Noah's flute and Mio's flute to be different sizes and turn to different scales, so I had the 2 types of flute prepared and used the music." Kata-san interrupts saying, "Actually, we started off by making the flutes." The interviewer then asks, "Wait, you made the flutes? So you didn't use Shinobi flutes that already existed, but rather made new ones?" Kojima states, "Before Mitsuda-san started writing the music, he said, let's make flutes. We wondered why we should be making them, but Mitsuda said by making the flutes from scratch, you could create a sound that's never been heard before. Since we had told Mitsuda-san in advance that Takahashi wanted to integrate the two melodies for Noah and Mio into a single piece of music, Mitsuda-san seemed to have thought that creating the flutes from scratch would enable him to choose a scale freely and express himself more easily. Above all, he said to me that the fact that the flutes used in the game exist in real life would be compelling and unique. It sounded interesting, so I decided to give it a try. And I agree. The fact that the flutes do exist in real life are really cool. And I want that flute. I would love to have that as a collector's item. I would learn the flute to get Mio's flute. I'm not gonna lie. I would learn the flute to get Mio's flute. Look at that design. It looks so fucking cool. So he went as far as making new flutes. It's possible to show us the flutes you made. And yep, here are the ones. Kojima says we designed them at Monolithsoft with the intention of actually using them in recording. Then we had the Shinobi Flutes craftsman makes them based on our design, and have a Japanese Urushi Laxier craftsman decorate them? I'm done. Wow, they actually exist. The interviewer asks, Yokota-san, how do you feel when you heard that the music creation would start from making the actual flutes? Yokota-san answers, as in the previous titles, I wanted to respect the world Takahashi-san was creating, and Mitsuda-san was eager to develop new sounds in order to create this world. To create music that matched the feel of the game, I thought it would be better to make the new flutes from scratch rather than using existing. Also, since I believe that people who have played the previous titles in the series also can play the music, appreciate having this kind of initiative that would lead players to immersive. I am so glad that these guys are so fucking dedicated to making a good game. It feels weird to say, but it feels like that's something that's been lost. Like, it's really hard to be like, yeah, we're making a good game. We're out here making a good game. We should try to make the game good. It feels weird to miss that. But that's just how I feel. That's how I feel. Like, a lot of game creation has kind of been lost in the era of loot boxes and stuff like that. So it makes enough sense for me to be like, yo, these people actually invested in making a game and they're like working with a AAA company? Hell yeah, that sounds cool. The interviewer then states, so this is how you achieve the unique sound expression in the world of Xenoblade 3. Yokota answers yes. Furthermore, the music is comprised of two distinct melodies, one for Noah and one for Mio. Noah's melody is played by a larger flute with a slightly lower pitch, whereas Mio's is played by a smaller flute with a slightly higher pitch. And you can see the side-by-side comparison right here. Again, I seriously want these flutes. Design and the surface of these flutes are very beautiful. I'm glad you agree, interviewer. I'm glad you agree. Kojima states, a 2D designer at Monolithsoft designed these, and it was quite detailed. Naturally, Monolithsoft had never designed a real musical instrument, let alone one finished with I don't know how to pronounce that. Lacure? So we must have sent a highly unorthodox design to the craftsman, but they made them exactly as requested. Takahashi continued. A red gradation was applied to Noah's flute. We heard this gradation is very difficult to express. It is expressed very beautifully. Kojima actually applies. We actually use these flutes for recording, and the music they recorded can be heard in the game. And if we're going to site right quick, so hear what they have. Sounds really pretty. I'm so excited for this game. I'm so excited for. Oh gosh! Oh, and I can hear the lower pitch there too. Shoot! Hang on a minute. That was really good. Heck yeah, that was super good. That was amazing. I love that. I love that so much. Oh my god. Guys, I'm excited for this game. It comes out tomorrow. It comes out tomorrow. Yokota asks, you have about 140 musical tracks in this title, including short jingles. Kojima said, 140 musical tracks in the game is extraordinary, right? Takahashi stated, I feel it still is enough. I want at least 15 more. Sure, fair enough. Theory was like, what? You still feel like that was enough? Kojima states, well, I wanted to reduce the number next time. But I do understand why Takahashi-san wanted more. The movie's only about 2 hours long, but a game takes a very long time to play. Even if the melody is the same, we want a slightly different sound in the scenes where emotions are different. To achieve this, you want to have more variations. Ah, so different variants of music. Like the main theme will have 3 different variants and stuff. Okay, interesting, interesting. Interviewer states, I see. So this is the culmination of your efforts, also in terms of the number of musical tracks. 140 in total that are tailored for various scenes. The music was composed by several people, Takahashi stated. The music tracks relate to the story were mainly written by Mitsuda-san, Mariam-san, who worked with Xenoblade 2, and Koyoda-san, who's arranged stuff for Xenoblade Chronicles and is a singer as well. The musical tracks related to the environment were composed primarily by Ace, a duo comprised of Tomura Kudo and Shiho, who've been involved since Xenoblade Chronicles, and Matsu-san, who joined Ace as a temporary member and created music for Xenoblade Chronicles. And we had other instruments that played in the motif. When you view it as a whole, I think we could join all the musical tracks together smoothly into one cohesive piece of work. In this third installment, I think we may be able to bring out the best of each composer's unique characteristics in many musical tracks by utilizing their knowledge gained from the previous 2 titles. The interviewer states, this kind of attention to detail helps to create a sense of immersion throughout the story, I see. Cutscenes interspersed throughout the game also have a major role in creating a sense of immersion for the player. Takahashi says, Koijima-san always tells you how to make cutscenes shorter. With motion capture, we can show the characters abundant facial expressions in cutscenes. However, not everything can be expressed using motion capture. To make the difference less recognizable between scenes with motion capture and other scenes, we made adjustments by inserting scenery or emotional scenes in between to make the translation between the 2 seem seamless. Here's the thing we're most particular about in the game's production. We have an example here. Heck yeah. Open this up. This one was created with motion capture.
Victory is we won! We won!
You know, no one doesn't seem as happy.
Your lives are ours! Your lives are ours!
Okay, so I'm assuming, yeah, this cutscene was created with motion capture. That's so what do we have with one without motion capture? Okay, there's Melia. This one was without motion capture? I thought it would be motion capture.
As soldiers.
Oh,
As weapons
these
for
look.
slaying
These
agony.
actually don't look. They don't look very dissimilar. That's crazy. Oh, that's great. They don't look dissimilar at all, actually. Oh yeah, very happy scene we just watched there. The transition definitely looks seamless enough that you wouldn't be able to tell the difference. I certainly didn't. Oh, thank you, interviewer. Takashi adds, in addition, when there is a transitioning scene from a field scene to a battle scene, or from a battle scene to a cutscene, we try to make that transition as seamless as possible without loading data. This is our first attempt, and it's quite challenging. Transitions may be seamless, but it sounds like the process of achieving that was difficult. Kojima reiterates, well, it was very tough. However, that's not to say that we were being reckless. The programmers and designers were also willing to take on this challenge. The development staff on site were also eager to carry through the project to the very end, so it's not all that difficult. However, the work didn't go as smoothly and consistently, and we wanted to apologize to Nintendo and Mario Club, a wholly owned subsidiary of Nintendo that handles debugging and minor testing for the inconvenience caused. Yokohara says, not at all. We talked for some time about how we wanted to achieve a better transition to cutscene or battle scene with the boss. I think we made a step forward to this title. There are some difficulties, but I'm glad we did it. Kojima states, absolutely. This title is one of the culmination of our efforts, and I feel that for the next title onward, we can aim to create a highly immersive world that seamlessly connects any scene from any kind of situation. Yokata concludes this part with the cutscenes, the music, the character design, everything is a culmination of what we have cultivated throughout the Xenoblade series. I believe that the challenges we face at this time will help us create something better in the future. Interesting statement over there. I hope this has more to talk about in part 3. We have a thing for abundance. The final part that released today. Still have more of this to read. Oh my gosh. How long have I been reading for? I've been reading for like 47 minutes. Ah! Reading! So much reading. Now I have a good understanding of your origins for this title and title's world and the details that support it. I'd like to ask you, does Monolithsoft determine the story first and then think of ways to play? Or do you have in mind the gameplay you want to create first and then come up with a story for that? Which comes first? Kojima states, the story is the basis. There is the story or world that Takashi-san comes up with, and we develop it into something that customers can experience hands-on. Of course, Takashi states that making-san makes the gameplay decisions as well, so we do our best to incorporate those into the game. Also, the entire development team will read the scenario and suggest things like, there's a main character who plays the flute, so let's incorporate gameplay featuring the flute. With the story as the foundation, we expand the world as it applies to the form of gameplay. Something I love with Monolithsoft. They always take their theme, or whatever weird thing they have in a game, and make it a prominent gameplay feature that also affects the story. And I am so happy about that. I can't wait to see how the flutes work. That's why I thought for like, how I thought the game would play, I thought they would have a flute meter. It seems like they're using the Ouroboros more, but I figured they would have a flute meter that would make them like get powered up attacks or something. The interviewer asked, have you always approached development this way? Takahashi reiterates my response with, yes, it hasn't changed. However, a big part of me thinks that the story and gameplay are developed at the same time, rather than one coming before the other. When creating the first and second titles, we would suggest gameplay ideas to match the world and story that are being crafted at the same time. But I guess the story is still the base. The reason is that in order to create an RPG, the overall volume of content has to be determined first. To some extent, we need to decide at the beginning how many hours the main story will be, how many characters, how many maps, and so on. The interviewer says, the Xenoblade series seems to have quite a lot of content, so you decided to do this a certain degree at the beginning and then start making the product? Takashi says, I think the feeling of having a lot of content differs from person to person, but ultimately, I like having an abundance of content. Yokoto agrees, saying, I also like having a large volume of content. Takahashi says, Kojima-san always asks me to reduce the volume. Yokota's like, I had to find a middle ground for my position too. Takahashi closed that out with, as a genre, RPGs require a certain volume of content, and there is a minimum amount of content required to play. I think that this is the result of first ensuing that the maximum volume and then adding on, I want to do this and I want to do that. I love that these guys are so interested in making a big old video game, like a super big video game that everyone loves to see. Even from every single game they have, the worlds are amazing and incredible, and it definitely shows in this interview. So are you saying that the development staff at Monolithsoft is receptive to the increase in volume of content? Kojima says, no, I don't think that's the case. Kojima then continues, however, because of my position, I would say, please reduce the volume. But in the end, I love having an abundance of content too. Besides, those of us in charge of landscapes and quests also love having a lot of content. In other words, the volume of content inevitably increases because the people who are making the game are all volume oriented. However, the volume isn't increased indiscriminately, but rather out of necessity. In order to create the world that Takahashi wanted to depict and make it convincing, we had to incorporate a certain amount of content. If it was a movie, you would condense it into 2 hours, and a depiction of a compelling world. With a game, you can freely explore the world to a certain extent. The areas characters traverse need to be large, and if there is a war going on there, it's necessary to incorporate a setting that involves the kind of people who would normally live in a war and how to go about their daily lives. That's why when we create all those things, the volume naturally increases. So everyone at Monolith likes having an abundance of content, don't they? I believe that's true. Takahashi then laughs. However, even though we say abundance of content, it covers a lot of things. I would say that the volume created in the Xenoblade Chronicles series is the volume of an idea content. Shift through the content to figure out what volume is deemed necessary for an RPG that can also be conveyed easily to our players. For example, let's say that we focus on details for an area map and create many variations or context-specific animations. I think that players would enjoy it even so, but eventually they would stop noticing it after, say, 30 minutes of the gameplay. We always ask ourselves, is there any other way to achieve greater satisfaction for players? And upon exploring and devising many areas, we also decide the appropriate volume of content. Well, I think Kojima says, well, I think Takahashi-san would like to have countless maps and character variations to tell you the truth. Because states, it's all about where you set your priorities, right? As this title links the world to the first 2 titles in the series. Although we can't have as much content as those combined, we understood that a proprietary volume of content would be necessary as the series' 3rd iteration. As a result, I think the amount of content exceeds the first and second titles. That's really good. I'm interested in what kind of quests you have, though. Because I know it's mostly fetch quests for Xenoblade 1 and 2, so I wonder if there's too many of those in this one as well. That one might just be a series staple at this point, though. Even for the scenario, I was planning on making a little less than the second title, but I wanted to include various types of gameplay, not only in the main story, but also during detours. So I packed in what I wanted to do, and as a result, it ended up having slightly more content. Well, I'd like that this third entry, the last one was such a. I'd like to have this third entry, the last one, was such a large volume of content. Kojima states. Oh, Kojima, you poor sweet summer child. But I'm glad these guys are really after making a good world for the player to go through. But didn't you think that for the second title as well? The interviewer asks. Kojima says, well, yes, that's right. Come to think of it, we were just talking about that yesterday in the office, that the world would be crazy big for this title. So I actually did the math, and it turns out that the total walkable area in the game is over 5 times larger than in the second title. Huh! So the total walkable area in the game in Xenoblade 3 is 5 times larger than the second game. This is going to be a long-ass game. I am all here for it. You mentioned the variety of maps and characters earlier, Kojima continues. But to be able to create such a large area with limited variation for landscape, naturally, I think Microsoft had accumulated a range of experts in map creation. For example, it would be easy to create variations in a landscape by preparing a myriad of textures. We try to be creative in different ways. In fact, there are many colonies where you can explore and enjoy quests, and if we put too much effort into adding a lot of detailed variations as well, such as wall patterns, I don't think we'd be able to provide as much gameplay as we did. Yokota interjects saying, we did have to talk about wanting to increase the number of towns in the beginning, so I'm glad we were able to put our heads together to achieve this. Takahashi adds, also, having to express such huge colonies called Feronius and having Ouroboros, characters 5 to 6 meters tall, battles simultaneously required a certain amount of space. Yokota says, Feronius is really huge. Those players will gaze up when they're out exploring. Sometimes I wonder where the Feronius is, and I look up and always think, wow, it's so big. It still surprises me. Akashi continues, you can see the colonies with the Feronius at their center from a great distance, and it's quite beautiful, isn't it? Yokota agrees, stating, this is exactly where that sense of Xenoblade-ness comes in, so I hope everyone will take a look at it. The interviewer then states, the environment, which stretches into the distance, feels like it's also part of the Xenoblade-ness. Speaking of the environment, this title has a guide function that points to the next destination. But should you give us the background on why this was implemented in this third game? Okay, and Takahashi answers, the main reason is for easy understanding, especially in the second title. Rather than simply exploring flat terrain where there's difference in elevation, so there were times where it was very difficult for players to find a target location. Trial and error is necessary to some extent, but getting too lost never leads to frustration. So we wondered if there was a good way to solve this. So we prepared the navigation as an option to guide players. We had a similar system called the follow ball in Xenoblade Chronicles X, but some players still said it was too difficult to understand. However, I was personally concerned about the guide system would make players only follow the guide, and that they would miss out on some instant gameplay discovered while making detours. Kojima then adds, but hearing people say that they felt lost in the past titles, I was determined to not let people feel that way this time around. As Takahashi-san said, if you add a guide, people will inevitably go that way, is pointing out. So I often had suggestions with Yokota-san about whether or not we should really put it in. Yokota-san, you deem it necessary to implement the guide system from Nintendo's perspective. Yokota states, members at Nintendo also had the same concern. However, when we wanted players to take detours, but having the system might discourage them from doing so. However, we thought we should be able to meet the needs of those who want to proceed playing the main story of the game quickly. As a side note, the game not only points out the destination, but also marks it with a pillar of light, making it easier for players to find even from a distance. Okay, right there. Nice. Alright, the interviewer then states, wow, this is easy to understand. But conversely, pointing out the next destination like this also makes it seem a bit easier to see where the detours are. Besides, it makes it easier to come back to the main route even if you make a side trip. Yokota states that navigation can be turned off, on or off at any time. You could turn it off if you don't need it, so we suggest that players who want to take their time and enjoy exploring on their own without help turn it off. I'm probably going to turn it off myself. Takahashi adds, we also have placed many things for the players to discover during detours. You can immerse yourself in the world of Xenoblade Chronicles 3 even further by experiencing these things. Demas then adds in, "We've created many colonies, but there are quite a few you wouldn't encounter if you proceed through the main story as guided. In fact, many of the heroes can be found in these detours. We therefore strongly encourage you to take a detour and explore." So a lot of the heroes aren't in the main story, which is kind of interesting. They definitely seem like they're going to be like the recruitable characters in Xenoblade X, where you have to do a side story in order to recruit them to your team. But I think they're using basically Xenoblade X's system for that. The interviewer states, "Speaking of heroes, heroes were introduced on the official website. What exactly are they?" Yokota answers, "As we mentioned earlier, there are generally 6 members in the party. However, there's also a 7th member, a hero, especially a spoiler hero, who fights alongside the party. As the name suggests, the hero is a strong and renowned figure in this world, and a reliable ally for Noah and his friends. We're saying that if all 6 characters constantly participate in battle, the fun element of changing party members, which is present in the previous title, would be lost. Therefore, you can choose a favorite hero among the 7 and take them out with you on this title." Kojima then continues, "By playing the main scenario, you'll encounter about a third of the heroes. However, many of them can only be encountered by taking side trips and playing through colony stories. We have created each and every one of these heroes with great effort, so I hope you'll enjoy their stories as well. When a hero joins your team, Noah and his friends can acquire the hero's classes and wear their costume, so we'll be able to change not only the way the characters fight, but also their visual appearance. In a sense, this may be the most game-like element." So, the interviewer obviously asks, "Do you think that detours are the most exciting aspect of the title?" Yokota answers with, "Both the main story and detours are highly recommended." Is there anything else you would consider for first-time players, says the interviewer. Oh, and this one's going to be interesting, because they're talking about the tutorials here! Yay! Hopefully the bad tutorials are gone. Takahashi states, "I would say the training drills. This is an element we can confidently recommend. In this title, players can fight in various ways, such as with combos and class changes, not to mention the arts of each character. We have therefore created a place where the player can learn each of them step by step by completing tasks. Even if you got how to perform particular art while playing the main story, for example, you can always access the training drills from the main menu screen and practice using the arts feature you want to master. You can always go back to the main menu in this title. We have put our effort into developing a system that would help first-timers avoid getting lost." And you can always, woo! That title transition looking clean though. Very low. Can I fix that? Can't fix that. That is unfortunate. Oh, and you can just go into the. Ah, this is the VR system they were talking about then. My friend was talking about the quality of life stuff. And that system looks really good. I was never able to make the quality of life video that would be added in there, but this looks really cool. And you're able to actually, oh heck yeah! Oh, these tutorials are gonna be so much better than in Xenoblade 2. These tutorials are gonna be so much better than the ones in Xenoblade. I didn't mean to do that. These tutorials are gonna be so much better than the ones in Xenoblade 2. Oh my gosh. Interviewer states, "Thanks to those features, it sounds like players won't be able to give up if they forgot what to do when they come back to the game after taking a short break." Takahashi states, "The tips explain how to use the new arts and items you've acquired, but the volume of text-based information is inevitably large. This is a feature we've implemented because we feel that the players need to understand how they work, not only by reading instructions, but also actually trying them out. Therefore, this is the thing we recommend most first-time players do so they can at ease. This is great. I am so happy they're making good freaking tutorial systems. There's also a lot of other different quality of life systems that are in Xenoblade 3 that I want to post up on my channel. But this is so awesome. I'm so happy about that. Finally coming down to the end of this long text. We have 2 more questions. Of course we have paragraphs of this. Alright. The interviewer states, "Thank you. From what I heard so far, it's clear that the newcomers can enjoy this as their first Xenoblade Chronicles game, even though it's the 3rd in the series. Lastly, could you tell us what you're thinking, highlights for this game, and any recommendations you have for the player?" Dakota states, "Yes, I want to talk about the battles. Some people may feel intimidated by the look of this game because 7 characters are on the screen at once, but this shouldn't put them off from giving it a try. While the tutorials and training drills, I feel that you will naturally understand how to fight the battles to a certain extent following the story. Besides, the party has 7 characters, so even if you mess things up a little, the other 6 will fight hard for you. There's also an auto battle function during most battles, in which the current character selected automatically attacks during battle. So please utilize it when you find a battle tough. I want to encourage those interested in the characters and story, but I think the battles are too difficult to start with this title." Kojima adds, "I really recommend the story. So far, we've made the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd titles, but I feel that this story is where we can best achieve what Takahashi wanted to do." I just lost it. There we go. "So I hope you'll try it. I especially want people around the same age as the main characters to play it. And creating the Ouroboros battle system was particularly challenging. Takahashi-san tasked us to enable players to switch back and forth between Ouroboros and regular form at any time. We need to remember that Ouroboroses are mighty beings. So I wanted to restrict the players so they can't use an Ouroboros at the beginning of the battle. I wanted to utilize it at the end to finish a battle. However, he insisted it would be wrong if the players couldn't become an Ouroboros as soon as the battle started. And we decided to reflect his idea in the game design. At the end, it turns out that this is a good idea because players can now choose to become an Ouroboros right away and go through the story quickly, or become one only when they want to give a well-targeted blow. I feel this system helps players who aren't comfortable with battles and offer a different way of enjoying battles. So Ouroboroses are going to be very powerful. We know that Ouroboroses are going to be powerful. They're going to be insanely powerful in this game. Takahashi then continues, "We had talked about this title in terms of being the culmination, closure, or summary. But it's been approximately 15 years since we began the development on the Xenoblade Chronicles series. I feel that this game represents everything we've done so far and is filled with answers to all our questions. At the same time, we've taken on a variety of new challenges in this work, and I believe that we are able to implicitly stare a glimpse of what Monolithsoft wants to achieve in the future. I think imagining what Monolithsoft's future would look like while playing this title would be another way to enjoy it. Also, this is the 3rd title in the series, but you can of course enjoy it on your own. We believe that both newcomers and those who have been playing the series for a long time will enjoy this title. I hope you give it a try." Dakota states, "This is something you consider after you've played the game. We are offering an additional expansion class. We will be adding a new story at the end of the expansion pass, and we are thinking of making its volume of content as large as Xenoblade Chronicles 2: The Golden Country." Oh, that's beautiful. Oh, that's gonna be so good. We hope that you enjoyed the content as well as newcomers will pick it up. It will be quite a high volume of content that will not let you down. Now, talking about the volume again. However, the full version of the game will be required to use the DLC. so it probably won't be made into a separate cartridge like Torna 2. Kojima then concludes this question with, I have not been able to participate in the development of the expansion pass, but the content looks like a lot of fun. I've always watched from the sidelines, so I'm a little jealous. I hope you look forward to it. The interviewer then states, finally, I would like to ask Yokota-san a question. This is one of the most important questions in this entire interview. You mentioned that this title is a culmination of the series, but am I right to assume that Xenoblade Chronicles series would still go on? Yokota-san states, yes, it will go on. I want to keep it going as long as possible. Thank you very much. Xenoblade X, please! Oh, man. Oh, that was beautiful. All right. So. I forgot to turn this off. There we go. Thoughts on that? I insanely love this interview. Honestly, I am so glad that people that are so determined and confident and want the good player experience are here making this game. Oh my gosh, I cannot wait for this to come out. I can't wait for this to come out. This is going to be so good. This is going to be so good. It comes out in like a day. And then later on, I'll get my freaking expansion pass. But it comes out in like a day. I am so excited for Xenoblade Chronicles 2. No, 3. Why'd I say 2? I'm sorry. Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is going to be so good. I am so hyped. As a Xenoblade fan, I'm so happy for this game. So happy for this game. I'm so happy for this game. I bought a sword. I got a sword specifically because of this game. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching this video. Please like, comment, and subscribe for more content like this. And I hope to see y'all next time. Adios.